Okay, so here's the CaseTalk. Let's start this new project here. Wait for it to open all the windows and panels. So on the left we have the vocabulary. We have a default expression file with fact statements that we're going to work with, and we have an empty diagram panel that says, hey, you need to do some work. And on the right we have our project file structure. I'm going to show you the classic way of entering fact expressions. We have a different video on how to get those. The classic way would be with the case of our apprenticeship here, that we have certain apprenticeships with a certain apprenticeship code that is assigned to a student. I'm selecting both statements and I press qualify, which will bring up a dialog in which we can classify and qualify the expressions. First of all, I'm going to start with selecting everything that has to do with the apprenticeship itself, and we're going to name this phrase in the expression, and we press apply. And we do the same thing with Peter Johnson. All of that is how we communicate about our student in this case. I'm going to name that student, apply to that, and then we're kind of done at this level. We will press complete to move on, and then within the phrase for the apprenticeship we have the apprenticeship code. I'm just going to enter apprenticeship code here and apply, and I'm done with this phrase. I can go to complete. It will move down, and in the S101 we simply consider that to be a simple value. We don't have anything else to say about that, and we move on to the next. Peter is our first name, and to make things a little easier I'm using the mouse, but you can simply press enter to activate the apply button, and I press enter to activate the complete. First name is just Peter, it's a value, and Johnson is the surname, which is also just the value. Now on the right you see how a graphical representation resembles our information grammar for this fact type expression. I can finish this, and once that is done I have terms in my vocabulary. I have the apprenticeship, I have the apprenticeship assigned, apprenticeship code, and all of those little details that come with it. And we can select all of that, drag it into the diagram, drop it, and to make that a little bit more nicer I have pre-made diagram styling for colors and settings, and we're going to make that layout nicely for us. I'm just going to center it, and there we have our first information model. Now we can instantly look at this as a UML diagram. I'm going to quickly preview that. It needs a second to calculate all of that, and there we go. We have an apprenticeship class, we have a student class, and we have an apprenticeship assigned class. And you can notice that the fact expressions that we started with also show up in our UML class diagram. Now you saw me work with that in a very classical way of dissecting our fact statements. I'm going to show you a slightly different approach. I'm just going to delete some of that so we can restart. Yeah, we're going to remove all of that, and this one too, and everything will be back to where we started. Now I'm going to show you a slightly different way. I'm going to start with the same expressions, qualify. In our previous iteration I started selecting phrases, but sometimes it's easy to recognize what the actual data is in the expression. So I'm going to select this one, just that, and tell it to be, this is my apprenticeship code, this is my first name, and this is my surname. It renders as a fact type with 3 roles played by apprenticeship code, by first name and by surname. Now, to make this more usable, we now can recognize, wait a minute, there is something more to that. So I can select the whole thing and now say, wait a minute, the combination of first name and surname, that is actually representing my student. If I go to the apprenticeship, I would really like to not just register apprenticeship codes. I want to be able to communicate and store and manage information about the apprenticeship as a whole. So I'm just going to select all of that and name that apprenticeship. Now you see it ends up the same information grammar, but its starting point is focusing on the data elements themselves. And I simply enter it. Now I still have to tell it that this is just a value. Same for the first name and for the surname, and I can just enter it through, and I would end up with the same information. Drag it in there. I can also just manually lay it out. And it does a dynamic layout, so you can see how it switches all of that. And I end up with the same information model. But I started focusing on the data and not on the entire object types or the phrases itself from the start. Now suppose we would do a similar thing, but we don't know just yet how to have phrases referring to students. And again, I'm going to delete some of the stuff here so we can start again. One way of doing that is I'm going to start a new expression again. Is to state, well, you know, I have an apprenticeship and it is assigned to a student. Notice that I add a little angular brackets to that. I have to name this. This is the assigned apprenticeship, because that is what this statement represents. I apply and I go to apprenticeship, and since I don't know any semantics, I don't know any data, I can simply tag that as this is a concept that I still have to work on. And the same for student. I'm going to mark that as a concept, and I am done at this point. There's nothing more that I know, and this is the information that I have. You can see that it has a slightly different structure because all of the details have not been entered yet. We don't know how to talk about students just yet. We don't know what identifies an apprenticeship. Now, after some work, I found a new expression that said, wait a minute, I have this student that lives in, let's pick Peter Johnson, lives in New York. I'm going here, and now what I realize is that, wait a minute, this is how we talk about students. So I'm just going to select all of that, make that the student. Naturally, this is my city. And I still have to now tell it what is the structure for it, because so we have to know that this is our first name and this is our surname. And it now upgraded the student that previously was just a concept to something with a phrase and a structure. Naturally, we will not be storing cities in our information system, but we are working with city names, so I'm just going to call that our city name. And then later on we can add more facts about the city in itself. So this is how that is being assembled. Now if we go back, oh, it still asks me, can you provide another example? Sure, we can do that. Let's do my name, and I live in the city of Utrecht, and add that to it. Now, if we go back to the diagram, you will now see that the concept for student is now being upgraded to an object type with a structure and a sentence and data values. We have our surname, we have our first name, we have the city of residence, and then we can do show related because we have something about the city and it has the city name. Now, to be able to work with the apprenticeship, we have to do something similar with that. We need to add phrases so we can actually communicate about it. And I'm just going to enter an expression, and you will recognize the phrases because you saw me type that before. And then marking it as an object type expression, meaning a small phrase, apprenticeship, with an apprenticeship code. And you can see how it actually transforms the information model, but also immediately updates the diagram. And I have my apprenticeship code here. And if I just add a few more constraints, I can start looking at all the generated diagrams. So that's another approach, and I'm going to show you one more for the people that are more acquainted to constructing information models. Let's again delete some of the stuff so that we can start again. Yep, and delete that. Oh. So first of all, we're going to start activating a toolbar that we need. I'm going to do tool preferences. I'm going to my my preferences here, my refactoring toolbar. That will help, and it will add a few buttons here that allow me to work with the information model on the fly. First of all, I can start with just a concept, like I did before, which is my student. I can add a concept for apprenticeship. And again, I end up with similar structures that I've shown you before from a more complete viewpoint. These can be selected, and I need to promote those first. I need to add verbiage to those. So again, I'm going to add a little expression to a phrase to that one. We're talking about Peter Johnson. This is just a phrase for the student. And first name, surname. Sure. That has been upgraded. We still need a similar phrase for that one because we need to be able to communicate about that. And let's do our apprenticeship. S101 with the apprenticeship code. I think I added it as an expression, so we're going to copy that to an object type expression so we can use it as a phrase as well. And now I can simply click this and say, okay, wait a minute, we have a connecting fact type. Student apprenticeship, yeah, we would like to say, you know, this is the assigned apprenticeship. So now it kind of does it in reverse. So we constructed our information model, and now it comes back with a dialogue. Well, if you introduce these relationships, you might want to look at the actual verbiage of it. So now we could play with that. We can swap it around to have it in a different order, and we can add semantics to that. So the student has the apprenticeship assigned would be a full sentence. Now if I click that, it still hasn't gotten any verbiage or examples for that, but I can reselect some of the values that the information model already has, And now you can see that if I double click here, and then look at the expression, we end up with a piece of information grammar with an expression that we otherwise would have started in a more classical approach. So different ways to enter it. And I'm going to show you one more approach, which some of you might like if you're used to working with tables and entities. Just again, delete all of that, close some panels. I'm going to check if that feature is turned on. Yes, it says create entity right here. I'm going to work with that. It has the option to start with entities. So let's work with a little example that says, okay, we have our student and then we have something called a city. Let's move on to the next one, because we now clearly are creating two tables. The student has columns. We are keeping the world simple. We have first name and surname and a city of residence. We move on. We can type whatever we want to have it referred. Now the city of residence wants to point to the city. That makes more sense. We move on. Now the primary key for our student would be the combination of first name and surname. Again, it's a small world. And for the city, we have our city name as with the one column in it. And then we check that automatically as the primary key. We move on, press OK. So, and now we similarly have that entire structure in there. And you can see how that quickly created an information model based on entities that you might be more familiar with. The trick here now is that you still lack examples, and the expressions are standard. You can see it has student first name surname and city of residence of student city, but it's not really natural language. So we double click on the city of residence and it's still trying to select multiple. There you go. And then we're going to do two things. We're first going to fix the semantics. Some references are missing here because it's just not quite up to date. Let's make sure that every verb is properly connected. There we go. Now we can start editing it. You can now see that it has the city of residence of student, and we would really want to say student lives in city. Okay. And the next part would be then to add some examples. Let's make that Peter Johnson lives in New York. And now we've ended up with the similar information model as where we started with traditionally. And I showcased now different ways of starting all of those concepts, phrases, entities, and then either start with the semantics or end with the semantics to allow the reverbalization of the information model.